the Tax Abatement Study and Formulating Committee. Today is October the 4th, and we are close to wrapping this up, I think. We'll do our best to, I think, maybe have one more round of assignments and get it all done, and hopefully have a final meeting in November and wrap it up. So I'll begin by saying that the council did pass a resolution.
We still exist.
We still exist. We're legal now, so we're good through.
We're hoping this was like a clandestine.
January, but we're not going to take till January. I will say the council has added Quinn Siegel from the Industrial Development Boards. I think she'll be a really good resource for this report. So I'm going to make sure that she looks at it as well, and that
is a committee member.
Not as a committee member. I mean, we sort of, by definition, defined what those could be, but she can certainly be an advisor. She, because this is a publicly noticed meeting, she can sit and comment.
Great,
which I think
fantastic.
Would be welcome input. And then also former council member Bob Mendez, who inspired this study, is serving as Chief Economic Development, or I'm not sure what the title official title is, but is also very interested in this study, and I think could also provide some informative input, so we will ask him for that as well. So so I've called this to order. Our goal is to finish at this point.
Land the plane.
Land the plane. That's exactly right. And so what I want to do is discuss committee writing assignments and drafts, and then set the next meeting and adjourn. So that the proposed agenda suits me fine. Does anybody have any changes to the agenda, or? We'll be quick and efficient. So Fiona had sent a few more updates to the document, and then I don't know if Danielle got my note in time to.
I think they went to print it.
Rosie may have gone to print that. So I've got today's document, which incorporates some of her comments. Angela kind of put your document in where I think it might should land. We may want to talk about that. And then right now, what's listed as the long-term recommendations, to me, include some important insights that I think are really more questions than conclusions. So I think what I would like for us to do is sort of talk through that piece, and then also just, to me, it's very important that we at least mention and articulate community values, and that may just be through a reference to the study that's going on. And so maybe, Tanya, if you can give us an update on where things are and where you think they'll land, maybe in the next month, if that might give us an idea on how to refer to that as a ongoing something or a close to finish something or whatever.
I'll give you what I know as of Monday, because I was officially my last day in the job. But the consultants were on track for a November report. But I have a feeling it's probably going to stay a little bit longer than that to get more community engagement, and not sure where it's going to go under Mayor O'Connell as well.
Gotcha.
But
and this group may not know exactly what the
I'm
consultant
sorry.
is doing.
My bad. So council had passed before I even came to the job in Metro Nashville last October, an inclusive economic development strategy. Courtney Pogue, I believe, brought it to council, funded through ARPA dollars. It kind of went on a long pause when Courtney left, and I kind of picked it up when I came into the job. So it launched with about 50 community members, have done some community engagements, have done some one-on-ones. I know they're currently meeting with council members as well. But the bottom line is to come up with an economic development strategy for Metro Nashville. As I had said many, many times, and I hear candidates say the same thing, which lets me know we're all on the same page. The purpose was not to come up with something new unless there was new needs. The purpose was, at least for me, when I had met with the consultants back in March, I said, why don't we go back and pull what has already been done, what studies have been done, and what action items are left over, and see where they fit or don't fit with where we are today in Nashville, and then see what else needs to be added. So that does include everything from affordable housing to what is the IDB doing or not, to wages, talent and workforce development, everything. So the initial goal was a November completion date, but as of Monday, I am no longer in the Mayor O'Connell administration, so somebody else has to pick that up and move it forward. So
we'll find out from them what that is.
Mm-hmm.
I had put into the RFP for this that part of this would include during the community engagement process just a listing of community values. which to me is something that would inform what we say tax abatement
Yeah.
incentives could be used for. And so I think that in the outline that I had sort of envisioned for this study, there was a section sort of on community values. I mean, they've sort of interspersed themselves throughout the report anyway, so that y'all may decide that's not necessary. This is a group project, so don't let me impose my will on y'all. But I would like to at least add a sentence with a reference to a community process that will delineate what those are. How are you? Thank you.
How are you?
I'm late, sorry.
Did you mention that to the consultants when you met with them last week?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I think listing out the community values would be saying what.
And having a specific section. Thank you so much. Okay, so this is kind of our running version, and if I have not, and Latanya, I know you had a lot of words.
That I have not put in here yet,
In a
but now I have
document.
some time. So
I think
I'm
that
gonna
you-
finally add my wonderful
Okay.
input that you have never seen.
Gotcha. And I feel like I saw a version of it and incorporated a lot of your language here. So
It's
check and see.
possible.
Anyway, if
But
there's
there's a
stuff,
lot that's not here, because
if there's stuff missing,
I was busy, but
okay,
now I have some
I
time.
know how that goes. I know how that goes.
Okay, thank you.
And so I think what we said last time is that we would love for this to be short enough to not need an executive summary. And so maybe that first section becomes the beginning of the introduction. And we just change that title. That's one thought I had made. And then I was looking back at comments that we had made at the last meeting. Those have, for the most part, been incorporated. So I'm comfortable with the introduction, possibly changing that first paragraph that says executive summary to the beginning of the introduction. And then I feel really comfortable now with the overview of currently used economic incentives. I made a few very small changes, mostly grammatical, commas and stuff like that. So I think we've now done a good job of explaining what the tax increment financing is, both from MDHA and from IDB, and then we've explained the pilots for low-income housing tax credits and the mixed income pilots. And I added a little sentence we talked about that just said this is a new project, and we'll know after that's been implemented better, if that process and if that amount is great. Okay, this actually does not have Angel stuff in there. I think this is the version that Fiona sent. So if y'all are pack rats as I am, and you still have last time, I have inserted Angel's section, which basically talks about having a tax incentive. Yeah, great. Tax incentive database. Tax incentive transparency database, I think. Anyway, I have added that section before the recommendations as part of our process, that we would create a centralized, and I can, maybe Margaret, is there a way if I send this to you that you could get it on the SharePoint? So that,
Tonight?
yeah, I didn't know if you worked that fast. Can I put it on the SharePoint? Can I share it to the SharePoint?
You might be able to. I usually rely on Danielle for
To
those
do that.
things. Yes, if you send it to me, I will forward it to her.
To Daniel.
And then,
Very good.
I need to also make sure I have access with my personal email. I can just email her and.
if you don't have access,
You should be able to.
It's a public SharePoint, I think, so.
Oh, she didn't
It
have to
should
add
be
me.
public,
Okay,
and you should have
cool.
access to it, but if you don't,
let me see if
let
I
me
can pull it
know
up, yeah.
so that we can fix it.
Okay, let me try now.
So you got stuck in the same traffic the rest of us were fighting, right?
Well, I had a community event.
Oh, gosh, and then you got
Dutch
here.
Brothers is now open in my
Thank you.
district.
Oh,
I
that's
heard
right.
you announce
I
that
saw
last night.
I saw it.
Is that it's really
trying to figure
caffeinated, right, their coffee?
Oh, I don't know.
I think I
If she starts
What
bouncing
street?
off the
Yeah.
walls, we'll know.
What is it?
Right
Dutch
by
Brothers.
the
It's a
paddock,
drive-through version of
Yeah, what
fancy
street?
drinks that Starbucks makes.
right there.
I've been to the one at Rivergate and Hermitage. I still haven't landed a drink I like.
Paddock Park. And that comes,
I love
The
it.
sugary stuff you shouldn't be drinking. Call it coffee.
Sugar with coffee.
almost free church.
Okay,
We do have sugar-free options.
all right, so back to our task. Here.
Priorities.
Right, okay, so, as I said, I have inserted your section on process after the description of those.
Okay,
With just
good.
an introductory sentence, and it is on the SharePoint, so those of you that, no, it's not, I just sent it to Danielle, so maybe Danielle put it on the SharePoint. But I will get that onto the SharePoint. There it is, I think it includes everything. I did not hit send, that's the problem.
It happens.
There it is.
Happens to me all the time.
It has now been sent, okay.
I just reached out to Danielle to see if she had anything new from you.
Yeah.
She said that she did not.
That is correct, she is correct.
Okay.
Okay, and it is still sending, so, because I'm probably not on the, let me see if I can get on the Wi-Fi, apologies. Metro Public Wi-Fi? Okay, I'm on it.
Okay, I can get on that, that's fine.
You should be.
Excuse me.
Okay. Right, I got away from my computer to let me try to send it again. And Quante, I was commenting on the recommendations section that you had provided that is in the information last time, or if you can get to the SharePoint.
Get to it.
Do you want, here's more paper copies. It's the partially updated version.
Okay.
It's here, not your version.
Okay.
The printed out.
Okay, that's great.
Councilmember Allen, if you want to email me and Rosie can print it and bring it down here.
Let me do that. Okay, so I am, give me just a
And I
second.
have I'm not ready to email it just yet, but I do have a longer form
Okay.
of that.
Great. And I was saying, and it may be, this may be helpful, I think you raise a lot of really good points that, to me, are worthy of a little bit of discussion in the, here are our comments on
okay.
the existing
Okay.
tools that are available and needs that we see. I mean, because you
Gotcha.
asked some really good questions about an equity review and some other things like that I think from there, we would then draw conclusions and
Gotcha,
recommendations.
gotcha.
Because to me,
Okay.
the conclusions and recommendations shouldn't say anything we haven't already
Gotcha, right.
discussed.
Right,
So if
true.
there's
That's a really
way
good
to-
point.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
my thought on that. So, so what I would like to see is, we've got sort of the process, we think, we would like to create a central spot where everything can be accessed from. We're not moving it from the agencies that do it, we just are asking IT, and I think, were you gonna check with, Keith and see if that was more than we could ask them to do, or if that was possible? That may have been on my to-do list.
I will, I did not write that down.
Okay, I'm gonna. Right, if we can get, you do that, check with IT. So all we're asking is, can there be a central spot, and we haven't truly decided if that should be under economic development or the finance department. Just someplace that people would think to go to, that, you know, I wanna access economic incentives from Metro, where in my brain would I go? And so if there's a logical central place that has, IDB does this, MDHA does this, you know, here's some data summaries on what each of those do, or here are the links to where they've got their own data summaries. But just, you know, if you don't know anything about it, here's one place that tells you everything that's out there, and then how to find those different things. So that's what your section does. I think,
Does it include a project? Because I think it's important if people can see projects.
it would have, I mean, the suggestion is that we would include the list of the
Yeah.
existing projects.
Yeah.
That was in the, hang on, because if you've got that here.
I think it's in there. I'm a
Yeah.
big guy, and I got so much stuff.
Comprehensive data collection, the database should provide a definition of available tools, and should include information such as the recipients, the duration, the purpose of the program, and the expected economic impact, with performance metrics and evaluation, mapping tools and visualization tools. So that's what you've spelled out there.
Okay.
So I feel like you've
I
made
thought
a
I
good
did.
description of what you want that to
Okay.
see.
Okay.
That's that should look familiar to you. And that, again, is on the
Okay,
marker.
yep.
Okay. And Darby, okay, and I'm gonna attach this right now. And misspelled.
Yep. I remember
Okay.
the wording that I read.
Okay, I am sending it at this moment. Hopefully. Still waiting to attach. And so then, Quante, if you can see a way, and then this may be a, Quante and Charles Robert, y'all decide. Two of the things we talked about were sort of breaking the questions we have about the existing system, or things we think it should do that it doesn't do, or reasons that we think it should do more. So that then when we get to the conclusions, we could say, we recommend these 5 things.
Right.
Because we've explained why we recommend them
Okay.
up there in the body report. Does that make sense? So that then when we get to the
Okay.
conclusions and recommendations,
Okay.
that it does that. So I think you just got that homework.
Okay.
And then with regard to the community values, I'm happy to tackle that piece of it. And since, Charles Robert, since you're not, well, Margaret, you tell me. Since he's not a council person, can they talk about these things, or as committee members?
It's the committee.
It's a committee, never mind.
Yeah.
I thought I had an out. But you got the out. So what we're back to is then editing our documents, sending it back to Danielle, having her put it on there, and just noting which one is the latest and greatest version.
Let me ask you a question. The transit-oriented development, somewhere I had it noted that it was supposed to be included.
That we want to talk about
Transit-oriented.
transit-oriented development districts as another tool.
Yeah,
And we're
I
not
thought-
sure at this point. Metro is still figuring out what entity is going to be the.
Study, yeah.
Okay. 'Cause I
It can
have
be
a
more than,
vertical
it's not just
construction.
MDHA that could do that.
Margaret, do you know this?
I'm sorry.
Sorry, that's okay. I know you're.
I still haven't gotten that email, so.
It's still waiting. It's still
Okay.
saying that it's still loading. I'm going to try to send it again.
I don't know if this, is it, if it's all right, I'm just gonna jump in on
Jump
that.
in.
I think our recommendation should be that we should utilize this tool.
Transit-oriented development. That's what we're talking about.
Transit-oriented development is, doesn't matter if it's MDHA or IDB or Health and Ed Board, that if the state has given us our tool to address both transit and housing affordability concerns, it is a missed opportunity for us not to be utilizing it. And I think that should be one of our recommendations. That should be pretty clear. That I would suggest that be one of our recommendations as part of this. You know, I've been, based on our last meeting, I took some notes of what I thought. I'd go and continue down this list of things that I was thinking about, like concrete kind of like nexus. That, since we're talking about that to me sort of doesn't, we don't have to have all the answers, but I do think it's worth pointing out that the two of the biggest concerns in the city are about transit and about housing affordability. And we have a tool that is sitting on the shelf right
Okay.
now.
I think that should go in the section of things we need to change. Quante's going to create that, and you're going to add the statement about transit-oriented development. Is that?
Sure,
Are you cool with
I've
that?
got other recommendations too, if you'd
This is
like.
great.
I think we've noted it. I think we should just be explicit, concrete about it. It would be my suggestion that we recommend to council that they increase the cap on the low-income housing tax credit pilot. For that to potentially get in the way of more affordable housing development would be a real shame. And so we should get ahead of it. We know that we're already pushing up against it. My thought would be more, in contrast, would be more of a wait and see approach with the mixed income pilot.
Right.
I would say that it's fully utilized now, but we've got, years and years and projects worth of history that have come out of the ground that are operating successfully when it comes to the low-income housing tax credit pilot. We haven't actually seen a project completed yet, so let's wait and see a little bit before, be my first thought about that, but that's just my, I think the other recommendation that we've talked about, and I think this touches on what you had, is one of the questions I think at the start is, should we have a hard cap on tax incentives? And I think Charles Robert brought up a really good point about this is, let's not create a cap arbitrarily. I don't think any of us are really qualified, or I'm not qualified to do that. But let's keep it transparent about how much we're spending. Like, let's just keep that number transparent so we know and we're informed about it.
And that goes back to the transparent
Exactly.
database that we're gonna create. So.
Exactly.
So maybe we've got a summary page there. Let's add that. I'm gonna add it to my document. Printed in the- Okay. well, I think
And then
that's
my
really
next one is, right now, MDHA's pilot is a one-size-fits-all approach to it. I think for specific projects that have an even greater potential social benefit, something like permanent supportive housing would be one great example where we're helping, harder to house individuals, individuals that have a harder time finding housing. That we shouldn't be restricted to 10 years. Those projects, those developments shouldn't start paying full tax rate after 10 years when they're providing such an important service to the community. So I think right now the way that it stands is a 10-year cap on that. I think that we should be, flexibility for MDHA in the duration and amount of pilots for tax credit projects. So,
They would still spell it out at the beginning when the council votes on it,
Yeah.
but they might say, we want this one to be 15 years.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
there is this mysterious process that they go through that is all math-based, but, one will be abated 95% and one will be abated 60%.
Yeah.
And it's based on
the financing sources in it and the
versus
gap,
whatever,
and yeah.
which is mysterious to me, but at this point, they're totally held to the timeframe, so you're,
And so I just think, in other cities, I've gotten 20 and 30-year pilots for permanent supportive housing projects.
Margaret, would that require an ordinance to change the way that pilot
It-
works?
For the mixed income,
No,
yes.
this is on the LIHTC pilot you're talking about.
On the LIHTC pilot, I don't know if that would require an ordinance change. It might require a state law.
It's done in other cities,
In Tennessee.
in Tennessee,
Okay.
by public housing
And
authority.
doesn't the $2.5 million have to be reauthorized every year?
It is not authorized because it's not spent. We have passed an ordinance that says this can happen every year, and there's a $2.5 million limit on an annual basis. And until we change that ordinance, that
Gotcha.
that
So
holds
it's
every
just
year.
automatic on a,
And we do a countdown. I mean, every time we get
Yeah.
one to consider in council, it says, we've got 2.5 million, we've used this much of it. And the last one we got was really, there wasn't much left on it. But, because we don't actually spend it, it doesn't end up in the budget. It doesn't come to us, which is the magic of why we're here.
To increase it, we would need an ordinance change. I thought we were talking about the time.
Timing, no, that was the question.
Okay, the timing of the length of the pilot, that would, if we want to go beyond 20 years for that, then yes, I think that would require some state approval. But I have to go back and look at the ordinance again to see if we're limited to that 10 years, because I kind of feel like we are, just with more reserves.
Trying to look right now.
Yeah.
Are we
and if-
limited by the ordinance or by state law? And
That
apparently
we,
not.
on that, we would be limited by the ordinance. If it was a 10-year limitation, that's gonna be the ordinance. State law limits us to 20 years or longer with state approval.
Gotcha.
You can do a 30-year pilot, but you have to have state approval to do it. And that is relatively recent. Well, I say recent, it was 2009,
Okay.
which feels very recent to me. But,
It's millennium, yeah.
yeah, before that, we could do pilots that were longer in length, but they changed the law then to create a uniformity and.
Okay.
And perhaps that's sort of two prongs of the same thing then, is a change in the capacity and the potential duration, that would be, because we need an ordinance to change the 2.5 million.
Right.
And if so, then if that's happening.
And that's the same ordinance, we could do that in a single ordinance if we chose.
To change to increase the 2.5 million and go up to 20 years, yes.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay, good suggestions. Anything else?
Not really. I think what we've seen evolving over time is, and this is I think a great result, which I don't know it needs to be, maybe this is more of an executive summary piece, is that like I think across time what we've seen is our tax incentive have more specific goals as their focus, and I think that's a unqualified good thing. I think we can just say, hey, we are doing this tax incentive to achieve this ends. I think economic development is good in general, but it can be harder to quantify, right? Like here we're talking about specific aspects. You can talk about affordable housing as an economic development issue just as much as you can talk about it as a social welfare issue or anything else. But I think this idea that we've moved towards more specific outcomes in mind in our tax incentive policies, that feels like a progress, like that's a positive development, and I think that's what's happening. Obviously, that was just like, and I think as we think about things being targeted in our approach, when we decide to spend future dollars, that characteristic that we've had with these different pilot programs that have come up, I think is just a positive one. So that's a general
Statement to make.
statement.
Yeah, and we kind of make that in the introduction. Not necessarily. So, and then, so I think those are good recommendations. I think what you have that are truly recommendations as opposed to questions, stay in the recommendations section. And then, we had talked about putting kind of some data stuff in the appendix. So I had suggested, this is the document I'm looking for. At this point, I've suggested at least 4 appendices. There may need to be more. One would be a summary of the MDHA redevelopment districts, just some basic information, a map that shows them. I think the color-coded map is really handy. And then this is the name of this one, this is its start and end date, this is how much it's got total. And then, as a second page, here are all the TIF projects that have been done within these redevelopment districts. Or that may be more information than we need, but some way to make it handleable. So maybe two pages total on that, and then
Inside and outside of redevelopment district projects?
So this would just be the MDHA redevelopment district TIF projects, is what I'm thinking. And then a second appendix B, would be a summary of the Industrial Development Board TIFs. And again, I mean, by again, timing, duration, and sort of what's still current and how much is still out. I mean, ultimately, I think one of the things we need is a table that says, here's how much money every year, and for the next couple of years, is being redirected or not collected, or whatever, however you want to do it, relative to the total budget of the city. I think that's the transparency that we're talking about here. So, again, so not so that we drive people towards a hard cap, but it just may be worthwhile to notice that it used to be 0.05% and now it's 0.5%, and that it's headed to 2%. And we may say that's great.
Yeah.
But we ought to know.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a certain former council member is going to be looking for. And then Appendix C would be a summary of low-income housing tax credit pilots. And because we don't have any fixed income pilots actually implemented yet, I don't know that we need to show that. I mean, at this point, we know that it's a $2.5 million annual cap. $3 million for the mixed income pilot. And that's out there. And then I think it would be helpful to add a summary of the state, at least references to, and maybe really brief summaries of the state and metro legislation that affects this stuff. Like 2 or 3 places in state legislation that talk about, and I appreciate y'all writing that down, because if y'all could help me do that, that would be great. So I'm gonna put that one on your back. That'd be great. you know, the ones that enable the Industrial Development Board, the ones that enable the Health and Education Board, and EDHA as a housing authority. And wherever that awful one is that says IDB can't do apartments, just so we can find
It's
it.
in there.
It's in there.
It's hard to find, but
Yeah.
it's in there.
So, you know, just, again, just to list those, I don't know that we, you know, and just to say, this is what this one is, and that kind of thing. I think that would be helpful to have. And then perhaps as a separate final document is here's how all these things fit together, and here's what it adds up to compared to the overall operating budget for the city. And that document doesn't exist yet. I've sort of started poking around with it. So I may continue to work with that and call on Joe Kane and you all, if you can help me get that into some form that makes sense.
This is kind of a silly thing to suggest, but it just occurs to me, maybe as a framing device, we could say something like, we do have property tax abatements for other uses that are just happening carte blanche. And like, we could talk about it relative, you know, like that may be, you know, we have this many acres of land that also don't produce tax revenue just by virtue of their use.
Nonprofit status?
And just as a framing device, right? As sort of like, we are talking about this, but this is actually, we do property taxes and collections are, it's not just everybody's paying full freight except for these very specific exceptions
Yeah.
that we're talking about.
So you mean exemptions like state exemptions
State
for
exemption,
churches
yeah.
and schools and
That sort of thing.
nonprofits?
Yeah. Some nonprofits, yeah.
Do we have that gathered anywhere?
So what specifically are you looking for?
I was just thinking, I mean, I don't think we necessarily need to do this, but I do think like you could say, hey, this seems like a lot. But in the scheme of things, there's a lot of property tax activity that of a significant sum. I don't want to get anyone angry at me, but
It might fall under that summary of state and local law
Yeah.
because there's a specific state law that talks about property tax exemptions and
Yeah.
you know, applications, they're granted by the state. It's not a city granted exemption.
Yep.
Is that, I mean, when you say there's a lot, do they all fall under that single umbrella ultimately?
I'm not sure.
Not all of them. I mean, there's, you know, like the federal government is gonna have property tax exemptions to some extent.
And theoretically, Metro property does not pay property taxes.
Yes, and that's in the general vicinity of the same section of code for
Interesting.
nonprofits.
Non-tax-paying property. That's an interesting thought.
I mean, just in terms of like, yeah, we as a community, which includes our state total, making a decision about who should be contributing to the resources of metropolitan government. You know, and some of that state, but we are part of the state.
So- Are all those properties assessed? I mean, do they all have, or I mean, not assessed, obviously they're assessed at zero, but do they all have an appraisal number?
Usually the assessor, if they're completely exempt, she does not assess
She
those
doesn't even mess with
properties.
them. So there's really,
It'd just be acreage more than I was just thinking, you could, and then you could figure out the average, but we don't need to do that. I just think that it's, in terms of, we as a community, larger community, have decided that places of worship are worthwhile in and of themselves and do not need to contribute towards the metropolitan government's tax coffers. And that's a worthwhile decision that's been made.
And just to
Yeah.
add to that conversation, when you say as a community, it's not that Metro has decided, the state has decided, because these are state laws that
Yes.
govern the property
Yes.
tax exemption, and the state grants those exemptions based on application.
Yes.
So all churches may not have an exemption, but they could if they go to the state and get an
Yes.
exemption granted.
Yes.
Just want to
Yes.
that it's not Metro.
No, exactly. But I do think that it's,
Yeah.
sometimes it feels like us in the state are not always aligned, but we are sort of all part of the,
is that a number that would
Intensity.
take days for somebody to come up with, or an hour or two?
And it might, it's gonna be a
It's a heavy lift, I
for
would
the
think.
assessor.
Wonder if there's any way to. you
Sorry,
know,
I should never have brought this up.
do one, I don't know, do one council district and then multiply it by 35 and say, maybe this is, well, I don't know. I mean, it might be interesting to do a council district, some small area that's, you could bite off and chew and go, oh, this is nothing, or, oh my goodness, that might be worth it. I don't know, that's an interesting question. All right. All right, I think that needs more discussion on how much we are willing to ask our staff to
I
do
don't,
for.
I don't think it is something of consequential that it should take anyone hours. Like wouldn't. I mean, if it was easy to find, imagine there might be something on the comptroller's office, that may have that. I don't know, but.
State comptroller?
I doubt it.
Yeah, I would be
She's messed with
surprised.
taxes a lot.
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
Both of us.
the assessor is my client. I mean, I can certainly have a conversation
Yeah.
with Assessor Will Hoyt, but my suspicion is that it's gonna be very hard to compile that kind of
You could get all the parcels and say which one has a tax assessment of 0,
Yeah.
and then this would be a database query that wouldn't be too complicated, I would think.
I think she can do that.
So what data are you looking for? Because I think if you're looking to get an actual number to figure out how much taxes.
Oh, I don't think that's possible.
Okay.
But I was thinking more like acreage might be an interesting, like that would just be like, oh, we've got this many acres of tax exempt land.
Okay.
Might be interesting,
Right.
I don't know.
Well,
And this is I mean, I don't want to create busy work for anyone because I don't think it's worth it. Yeah, but I just thought it's like.
I mean, if it turns out to be 50% of the acreage in Davidson County, that would be noteworthy, I guess. So do we-
I mean, if you take the parklands.
yeah.
yeah. Well, I can certainly have that conversation
Yeah.
with Assessor Will Hoyt and see what we can come up with.
Okay, check acreage. All right. We'll limit you to a couple hours, how about that? If it starts to be too much, just tell us you made a good faith effort and it was more than we could handle. Which is fair enough. Okay, so those would be then our 5 appendices that we would add on that. So I would say if everyone knows what her homework is, and we are willing to work through this crazy system with Danielle being the catcher, and try to make sure that if you get a bee in your bonnet and you decide you're gonna work on it, I'm gonna ask her to save kind of the working document by date, so that if you go to the SharePoint and pick up the working document with the latest date on it. I mean, I've got one now that's misspelled, that says combined document, today's date.
Okay.
It doesn't have your words in it yet, and I typed in the old version of your,
Okay,
of that outline form that you had.
okay,
So that's where it is right now,
okay.
but I would say if we just work off of the latest dated combined document, if you get inspired, pull the latest one, work on it, send it back to Danielle and say, please file this one with today's date, and then I'll just keep pulling from it.
Okay.
Does that sound like a working plan? And then if 2 people are working at the same time, Danielle will know it when they both land in her lap, so we'll have to ask her to be
Okay.
the keeper of that. So and Mick, you and Quante are doing a little bit of a dance in the same area of the document, so that'll be tricky. You're gonna do the transit-oriented development piece of it, and suggestions about,
Would it be helpful just for me to write up what I said and share it with you, and you can, would that be the? Or is that?
send it to.
Send it to-
Yeah, I'll call it Mick's comments,
Yeah.
in a Word document, and then you can just lift
Yeah,
out sections
just
from it. Okay, that sounds like a
gateway
plan.
makes sense, and discard
Okay,
the rest.
I'm gonna add a section about the values. Quante, you're gonna break yours into 2 pieces. One sort of the here's how I wish things would change, and then the conclusions will formalize the things that we agreed to there. And then, the recommendations, you had some specific recommendations that, once you
Yeah, that.
break yours into 2 sections, here changes, here recommendations. Cause the changes were talking about transit-oriented development.
Okay, let me see. And that's in what section should that go in?
So right now, we've got kind of the section that explains, here's what we have.
Mm-hmm.
And then Angel has kind of written a process
Yeah.
section.
Yeah.
And then I think what needs to come next, either before or after the process section, is things that don't exist yet in what we have now. So maybe that comes before the process, and then we'll talk about adding the database where everything's centralized. And then finally, we'll have the recommendations. I think I will add the values piece into the things we wanna have. Because up to now, it's been sort of focused on job creation, and then we've added affordable housing, but to get the other things in there, so I think that's where that stuff will fit. Okay, and then your specific suggestions about the low-income housing tax credit pilot being raised, and more flexibility on the time, and then the mixed income pilot, wait and see, and then do we want an overall hard cap? No, but we want it to be transparent. That will end up in the recommendations section. And then on the appendices, I will make a stab at the appendices, but I'm gonna ask y'all for help on the putting it all together table. Does that sound like a plan?
What was number 5 on the appendices list?
I think that's where we put the total of the metro budget. We put the different types of things, maybe the sums of each of those together compared with the metro budget. Because it didn't really belong in the summaries of each of those. So there's the summary of the MDHA TIFs, the summary of the IDB TIFs, the summary of the pilots, summary of the legislation, and then the putting all the numbers together in the budget. Or we could flip-flop those two since everything's about numbers until you get to the bottom. We can readjust if we want to.
I hate to ask this now, we only got a few minutes. Josh, is this the proper forum to deal with the issue we had with Bellevue Mall? And when they went to the assessor to get their reevaluation of their assessment and how it impacted their abatement?
No, I think that's a little bit different.
Okay.
Yeah, we can certainly discuss that, but I think that's something a little bit different that's outside the scope of this.
Okay. Even though it impacts the amount of money they may or may not.
It does, but I think, so the issue there that you're referring to is that there's TIF financing involving the Bellevue Mall, and unfortunately for the last couple of years, has not been enough increment to pay the debt service on the bonds. And one of the issues that came up was that when the assessor had to do the reappraisal in 2021, because of COVID, there was quite a few deductions that were given to some of the property values. And that resulted in there being less tax increment available to pay off the bonds, or make the yearly debt payment on the bonds. But I think that's just the assessor doing her function of assessment. The appraisal values went down, and unfortunately that resulted in less property tax value. There really isn't anything that I think this body could recommend to the council to do to change how that occurred.
Am I wrong that there was talk about notice, like when the entity, whatever the owner of Bellevue Mall is, requested that reappraisal? Didn't we talk about the notice to the IDB that was gonna happen because they may have possibly some input into, I don't know.
I don't remember.
Okay.
Sorry.
I remember there was a notice issue. Because Quinn had raised it, like, we found it in the newspaper, but this was something that we had approved at the IDB, yada, yada. I could be mixing up something.
Yeah.
I was thinking we could recommend no more pandemics.
That's all the
In big bold
Final
letters.
recommendation.
I think that's a good one. Okay, any other questions, thoughts, suggestions? Everybody knows what their homework is? Okay, I appreciate everybody being here. So again, I'm as guilty as everybody. I tend to wait until the last to go, oh man, this is great. I've got an hour. So if we try to do this stuff early and then realize what great things we can do, let's try to use the next 2 weeks to get that stuff done, but let's not meet again until November whatever that Wednesday is. Are we off? Have we been the first Wednesday of the month so that we're right after the council meeting?
It would be fantastic if we chose a different Wednesday to meet.
So let's think the Wednesday before the council meeting means that you will have just gotten the agenda out. Is that better or worse?
I believe that is better for my ability to be awake.
I mean, the first Wednesday is actually the first, so there won't be any council meeting on the Tuesday because it'll be
Halloween.
Wait, what?
November 1st.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Out of the country.
Was that?
I don't know if that's a good idea.
So November 1, does that work for people? All right, let's shoot for that. And I think our goal is to have a document printed out at that time, that all we're doing is making very minor changes and saying this is gonna be ready to go to council in November. Can we do that?
Fantastic.
All right, thanks to everybody. We are adjourned.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.